Hello, hello, hello to you, and welcome to the Understanding God Summit. I'm Kinara Lloyd, your host and founder of the Training and Influence Center, which is based here in sunny Nassau, Bahamas. I'm a spiritual life influence coach and a training specialist, hosting spiritual development seminars in a non traditional format for persons who are interested in learning more about God or want to connect with Him in a greater way outside of typical church settings. Thus, we are here at the Understanding God Summit. Today, I am absolutely delighted to present to you another interview in this video series on a topic that is definitely passionate for many, and that is love and forgiveness. Here to chat with me and uncover this interesting theme today is Harrison Thompson. So, let me tell you a little bit more about him and his background. So Harrison is a passionate therapist and relationship consultant that has mastered the complex art of helping people where they are. He holds a degree in psychology, and he's been counseling and assisting singles and couples for 7 years here in the Bahamas, where he was born. He's widely known for his edgy, viral videos on all matters associated with relationships, dating, and inspiration. These videos later awarded him a Bahamian Icon Award as the People's Choice Icon of the Year in 2016. Harrison has worked with a multitude of government branches, organizations, colleges, universities, churches, and corporate businesses alike. He and his beautiful wife, Brittany Thompson, love to travel, to vlog, and celebrate life together. Welcome to the Understanding God Summit, Harrison.
Thank you so much for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be here. I can't wait to get into this today.
I know, right? I'm excited myself. I'm glad to hear that you are really ready to dive into it, because I'm certainly ready to talk more about it and to hear what you have to say. Now, I know we have a lot to cover, and we have a limited time to digest or to uncover what you have to say with regard to love and forgiveness. So I'm going to proceed right into my questions for you today. And the first one I'm going to ask is just to give that foundation for people that are watching. How would you define love and forgiveness, Harrison?
So the definition of love can be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. To some, it's a feeling. To others, it's a choice. I personally think that it's a combination of the two. But of course, it has foundations in our Creator, God Himself Almighty. You will find that love is the ability to see a person for who they are, appreciating them for who they are, not necessarily who you would want them to be, right? Because the version of people that sometimes exists in our mind isn't necessarily the version that exists in reality. And because we don't understand that disparity, sometimes it becomes very hard to truly love and appreciate people for who they really are. And this is why, in this world today, we have so many indifferences. It's so hard to forgive, which is why I wanted to join love and forgiveness together, because we don't understand the concept of truly loving people. So if I had to define forgiveness, forgiveness is the ability to remove ourselves from the hurt that has been plaguing ourselves, that has been plaguing our relationships for a long time. It's not necessarily something we do for the other person, it's something we do for ourselves. Forgiveness says that I will no longer allow myself to be consciously affected by the pains of the past.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Well said. I agree. So with that said, then, what would you say is the relationship between love and forgiveness?
Right. So if if we say that we love someone, then by default we will be hurt by that person. There's no doubt about it. It's just a matter of time, right? Because when you love a person, you begin to develop expectations, you begin to develop your life around this person, and sometimes them being who they are can be just enough to upset you, to hurt you, to rub you the wrong way. When we decide to love a person, we have to understand that it's not necessarily about loving the potential that they have. It's about loving who they are. Because like I would have said in the definition of love, we tend to see the version of them that we want them to be. Because we're very egotistical as human beings, right? We tend to think more highly of our feelings. We tend to think more highly of our perception. And we trade in those perceptions for the truth that is sometimes right in front of us. The
Mm-hmm.
closer we can get to accepting that reality in terms of who this person is in this relationship, then we begin seeing opportunities as to how we can begin loving each other more deeply in truth, how we can begin supporting one another in terms of our preferences, in terms of goals, in terms of where we are trying to go, because you can't change the things that you deny. Love allows us to see this person for who they are without allowing that to affect us negatively.
Wow. So I have a question, right?
Yes.
With all of this said, and I know we're going to be focusing a lot today on the forgiveness aspect of love. When once, and the thing is, it's hard for people to forgive unless they
Hmm.
understand what love is. So,
Right.
what would you say to people who are there's so many relationships around, all kinds of relationships, but I think we're talking today specifically about, or we want to focus on intimate relationships, but it can be applicable
Sure.
to any kind of relationship. And so, what I'm asking is, as it relates to intimate relationships, what would you say to people to help them to fully appreciate and understand what love is? What is there any advice that you would give to people just so that they can know if love is not simply a feeling, as you said? What would you?
True. You will find that the greatest example of how we should love was shown through Christ, right? And the way that Christ loved the church. Now, you and I are not Christ, right? We do not have the ability to sometimes love beyond our feelings and emotions. So you find it takes a conscious effort. It takes a real understanding of what goes into love to really understand how to love.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to forgive is directly correlated with our ability to love people. If we ought to love like Christ loved the church, well, you just look at the church. We offend Christ almost daily. We lie, we cheat, we steal, we sin, right? It is in our human nature. But yet, even through our shortcomings, we are still loved through the concept of grace, right? We are not deserving of that love, but we get it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
When you bring that to an intimate relationship, our spouse will sometimes do things that will disqualify them from love. They will lie to us. They
Right.
will omit parts of the story. They will do things, sometimes consciously or unconsciously, that really hurts us.
Mm-hmm.
But we get so caught up on the hurt because we don't truly understand how love is supposed to work. And so we begin identifying with the hurt.
Mm-hmm.
When we try to identify with the hurt, we tell our spouse that you need to do something to make me happy again. But you find that that is no longer an authentic exchange of love. Love now becomes conditional.
That's it.
When we understand now that in order to forgive, I have to first learn how to love you with truth, I can begin letting go of these hurts because I realize that that has more to do with you than it does with me.
Mm.
I wanted to advise anybody on, how to love. Look at how Christ loved the church. What would Jesus do? You remember the bands that we used to wear back in the day when we were younger?
Yes,
It's
yes.
a powerful question because it really focuses us onto how we can begin responding as opposed to reacting. Because this human body will always want to react to the things that are going on in our environment.
Okay, awesome. So I'm hearing there unconditional love, placing no
Yes.
conditions on how or why we love someone. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that is the paramount truth there that people should appreciate and understand. Um, and so
Definitely.
I always say it's hard, but unconditional love is really the foundation for
Yes.
particularly intimate relationships, but really all kinds of human connections. All
For
right,
sure.
today we're going to be segueing more on towards forgiveness and how people ought to respond to individuals who've hurt them, be it in a relationship, either currently or past love relationship, or like I said, even in a broader context. What should we do um, when we feel offended, and should we forgive them?
Mhm. That's a big question. So I think the most important conversation is the conversation that we have with ourselves. And we often overlook this because we allow the conviction of our emotions to make us think that we are justified in acting the way we want to act. We
Mm-hmm.
find that most times when we are angry, we don't know how to express anger non-violently. But because we are emotional, we think that it's okay to express our anger violently. So if you find yourself getting offended or hurt, ask yourself, why am I hurt? Are you hurt because, maybe there was an expectation that was broken? Do you even know why you're hurt? Because sometimes what I have found out in doing this type of work, our emotions doesn't always show us what's going on in our environment,
Mm.
meaning that we tend to react to what we feel first before giving it a second pass to find out, is this a legit reason for me to be angry right now, right? So because we never have the conversation with ourselves, we carry the conversation to our spouse. Because we don't really understand why we're angry, that conversation spirals out of control almost instantaneously. And
Mm.
so now it comes he say versus she say. We get angry and we part ways and we never really resolve the situation. So have the conversation with yourself first to identify why you're hurt. Knowing why you're hurt allows you to have the proper and necessary conversation with your spouse.
Yes, yes, yes. So true, right? To be able to critically analyze exactly what's going on within ourselves to
Yes.
before we first even put the blame on the other person whom we deem may have offended us.
Hmm.
So I guess then once that is done, Harrison, the if it has been determined that they've really hurt you, that they did
Right.
something that was upsetting, that was painful, it's legitimate. You recommend, of course, to practice forgiveness.
Right. Practicing forgiveness is going to be, it's an ongoing thing, right? It's not something we just do when we're hurt. Practicing forgiveness is, it's a state of mind where we're constantly reminding ourselves of the accountability we need to have to our own health, to our own spirituality. Because at the end of the day, it's still our soul that we have to go to God with, right? The relationship is here, but we are still responsible for our own soul. When it comes now to actually correcting something that has been done, whether it's a behavior, whether it's just this person's ways, or bringing in awareness as to how I truly feel about, when you do something, we have to remember that correction will always hurt. Correction will never always be on time. There will always be an awkward element regarding correction.
Mm-hmm.
But I like to think of things in terms of an Oreo, right? An Oreo is composed of two cookies and a cream filling. I
Right.
always tell people to try and draw attention to what this person is already doing or attempting to do. Open up the conversation with something that's nice, something that's pleasant, easy to receive. After you segue from doing that, then you need to bring home the hard truth. Well, listen, I feel offended by X, Y, and Z, or I do not really appreciate when you do X, Y, and Z to me because it makes me feel like this. And then
Mm-hmm.
you close that conversation off with another compliment, or maybe even an ode to faith and hope that I know we can work through this because I know you're such an understanding person, you're such a loving person, and then you close the cookie together. Of course, the human behavior says that it's not always going to be that easy. And I'm not saying that this is how it's supposed to happen. Sometimes we're going to rile up, we're going to say things that we shouldn't say, our body language is going to become closed off, and we get passive aggressive. That's okay. Once we adhere to the basics and we don't allow ourselves to deviate too far from the norm, we can have an understanding about how we are to approach these situations, which creates a culture in the relationship for how we ought to respond to these things moving forward.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Great advice. Good information. So you've had the conversation. You've practiced the art of communication and
Mhm.
trying to express that you've been offended by somebody, that your loved one has hurt you, or someone you have a relationship with. You let's say they admit,
Mhm.
or even if they didn't, and you decide to forgive. What happens to your offender, Harrison, when you forgive them?
Well, the thing with our offender, Sometimes they aren't even affected by our forgiveness because people will always feel justified in feeling what they choose to feel some type of way about. That person has to decide to want better for themselves. They have to decide to want to grow because there are few things that we can't help other people with. Number one, we can't grow them up. We
Mm-hmm.
can't increase people's empathy. We can't increase people's understanding. That is a pursuit that they will have to make. Love enables us to become pursuers of those things for our spouse. If I say I love my wife, then I also love the things that are important to my wife. So
Mm-hmm.
just because I don't have an understanding because I love my wife, I am developing a capacity to become more understanding of something that I didn't understand previously. So instead of reacting to something, I change the story, I change the narrative that I am now telling myself. By changing the narrative, I actually find out that there may be different ways to resolve this particular issue before. And so when you take the looking glass off of your spouse in terms of what happens to them after I forgive, you realize that it doesn't really become your concern because I have liberated myself of my contribution to the problem. I let you know how your actions have affected me. I have changed my response to those actions. And so now what this does is it forces you to see how you have also played a role in the hurt that I am experiencing as well. And
Mm-hmm.
say that you do love me. Can you truly live knowing that this is what you have been doing to me? If so, that's a bigger red flag, right?
Okay. Okay, so forgiving the other person really has nothing to do with them. You're saying it's really about um, how you want to be and how you're going to be affected by your
Yeah.
choice, either to forgive or not to forgive. That's what I'm
Right.
saying, correct?
Right. Because I think this may be a good time to say that there's a distinction between forgiveness and reconciliation. A
Hmm?
lot of times people think that because I forgive you, this is also the start of a reconciliation process, but that's not true. I can forgive you and we don't reconcile.
I love that.
Reconciliation requires two people.
I love that, Harrison. That is so true. That is so true. I think a lot of people may have that misconception to think that if I forgive them automatically, that means I have to be friends with them again. I have to be chum chum with them again. We have to continue off where we left, continue on where we left off. And that's not always
Right.
the case. I mean,
No.
I can personally attest to situations where I have been hurt. I believe
Yes.
I went through the process that you've spoken of here today, Harrison, and it
Yes.
it was interesting. It became obvious that yes, this is a legitimate offense. Was
Hmm.
willing to go through the conversation, the difficult conversation, and
Hmm.
to share with them what would have happened. And
Right.
in this case that I'm speaking of, unfortunately, they weren't receptive. And when that happens, you have to you have to be willing to to move on. You have to be willing to still forgive in spite of, and the relationship just don't necessarily have to continue is my point here, and
Yes.
that's okay, and to be at peace within yourself for moving on, and to know that as a result of you forgiving, you're still at peace with God, because ultimately that is what really counts.
Yes.
We do not forgive others. The Word of God promises us that um, we will not be forgiven. It's made plain in the model prayer that Jesus taught his disciples, Our Father, and forgive us this day our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. And that's a condition.
Ah,
And so, yes, I love that point that you bring out there, Harrison, that forgiving somebody that has hurt you does not necessarily mean that you have to reconcile with them.
yes. And if I could break that down just even a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
reconciliation or premature reconciliation can sometimes cause us our soul because we often try to go back into a situation that has been broken. Even though we've forgiven, you find that constantly exposing yourself to this person or constantly, breaching your own boundaries, it will cause you to begin holding on to hurt. And so you have to realize that after forgiveness, how can I maintain my own peace? How can I maintain happiness? Because, like I said earlier in our conversation, we still have to protect our soul. God gave this responsibility to us. If being this particular way with you is causing me to compromise on my morality, that's not good for me.
Yes.
And so sometimes just because I have forgiven you, we may not be able to reconcile in a particular way because I have to preserve my soul. And in which case we have to have different conversations now about what can we do moving forward. Because sometimes the offense is such that it can't simply be something we ignore or say forgive and forget. This is something that must change or we can't work out.
Mm.
Hmm.
Good stuff. Yes, yes. So I'm glad to hear that differentiation between
Yes,
forgiveness and reconciliation, Harrison. I have another question for you.
sure.
What causes certain people to not forgive? What in your experience, in your expertise, is the main causes for people choosing not to forgive?
Yes. So the room is too small, right? Meaning that we begin identifying with the hurt. We begin thinking that our experience was the most right experience. And because we never stop back to challenge and question our feelings, we begin listening to our feelings as a legitimate truth, in which case that's an error. It's not the legitimate truth. It's just our interpretation of an event. And so people who don't know how to get over hurt usually have a hard time accepting different stories or accepting a different possibility. You
Mm.
about to say something?
Yeah, I was just, that struck me just now. People,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I lost my train of thought, but I'll let you continue. It stood out to me just now with what you were saying. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it'll come back to me. Go on.
sure. So we identify with the hurt. We begin thinking that our experience was the only experience, was the most right experience. And we begin moving through life with that entitlement. I call it destructive entitlement, where we think that we are right for feeling how we felt because they lied to me. They hurt me. There's
Mm-hmm.
a reason why I don't talk to them. There's a reason why I do X, Y, and Z, why I don't trust them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But until we begin realizing that there are more truths, because, sometimes a few truths can exist at the same time, it's not just our experience, right? The ability to step back from our hurt, to engage in how we are thinking, to ask ourselves, do I have the necessary information to really feel this way? You start to see that maybe I have more of a contribution to the problem than I previously realized. But unfortunately, we can't control how people see things in life. The only thing that we have control over is ourselves. If I make it my mission goal to help my spouse see something that they couldn't see, I will actually be the one that gets more frustrated. I will actually be the one that gets more hurt.
Mm-hmm.
My spouse becomes more inclined to challenge the way things are when they see me becoming more accountable for myself. And
Mm-hmm.
make no mistake about it, there are no issues in a relationship where one spouse is completely responsible for a problem. Sometimes it's just easier to point out a particular problem because it has an obvious offense. But sometimes we don't see how we've been contributing to that very same problem by our body language, not being open for communication, not being emotionally present, and that sort of a thing.
Wow. Yes, it came back to me. You were talking about it. That is the fact that people's experience is oftentimes in their mind final in terms of the truth, the reality of what occurred. And what I'm hearing from you is really the need to have understanding, the need
Mhm.
to be knowledgeable about how to be a great partner in a relationship. Uh,
Yes.
and that is because this information is not always just readily known. We aren't necessarily brought up in all of us anyway, in homes where we are taught this from our parents or they had the insight. And so it seems so simple, but it's amazing
Yeah.
how many people do not appreciate or understand just that simple a fact that we ought to consider the other person's perspective. We always hear there's your side or my side, your side, and then the truth, right? And so
Yeah.
what you're saying here is to be aware of the fact that just as you're seeing it, just because you're seeing it one way does not necessarily mean that that's the entire reality or the entire picture of what's happening.
Yes, because I often say this, love is not intuitive. When we get involved with someone, there's not a PDF that we can download off of a website to say how we ought to love and how we ought to forgive and how we ought to communicate. We often find this out through trouble, through conflict, right?
Yes.
And conflict is necessary because it challenges our reality in a way that we can't deny, right? A conflict is not something we can, well, some people try to deny it, but a conflict is something it's there, it's in our face, that conflict. I
Yeah.
mean, if we don't have that conflict, we will never see how maybe there's a better way to do things.
True, true. And I think a great piece of advice for people in relationships, especially intimate relationships, is to obtain knowledge, right? To really seek out wisdom on how to be successful in a partnership, in a relationship with another human being. And so this is good, just for people to appreciate that there's so much more than meets the eye. Okay, so
I'm totally in agreement.
let's talk about forgiveness and whether or not it is a feeling or is it a decision? Is it a choice or is it a feeling, Harrison?
So I think that, well, I am of the thought that forgiveness is a conscious choice that we have to make, right? Because if we wait for the right feeling, it'll never come. We wake up with the feeling to be motivated to go to the gym. We wake up with the feeling to be motivated to love. And then we wake up and that feeling isn't there. Do we not love? Do we
Uh,
not go to the gym? Being able to make conscious decisions in the midst of how we feel is a very personal responsibility that we all have because we are all victims to our emotions, right? If you are a human being and you are living, you will be in conflict with your feelings quite a bit.
yeah.
Training yourself to see how you feel is essential to even learning how to forgive a person. Meaning that, okay, what is it that I have to do to rid myself of this pain right now? Because if I leave it the way it is, it won't go anywhere. That gives us a deeper sense of urgency to say, I need to do something about this regardless of how I feel. If peace, if happiness, if truly loving and emulating the relationship between Christ and the church is what I say that I want.
Hmm. Okay. All right. This is great, man. So not relying on the feeling to forgive, but making a deliberate decision to forgive somebody that has hurt or offended you. And in so doing, we of course recognize that it has so much benefits, not only for us holistically in our souls, but it also doesn't interrupt or affect even our relationship with our Creator.
Mm,
God is amazing in that He has first demonstrated to us this whole notion and idea of of forgiving people, even when they don't always deserve it. We saw
right.
perfectly demonstrated in His sending His Son Jesus Christ to the earth all those years ago to be
Mm,
the atonement, to be the price paid for mankind's sins. And so we're definitely demonstrating a characteristic of our God when we choose to, keyword there, choose to
yes, there it is.
our loved ones and not wait
Yes.
on that feeling. All right.
Thank God for Christ.
Yes, for sure. Definitely, definitely. Okay, so I mean, this information today here, folks, as you can tell, is extremely valuable. And I know that you may want to be able to hear this again. And so if you'd like to ensure that you can have access to the knowledge shared here today, or perhaps you want to present it even or share it with a loved one so that they can watch and listen to it too, then I encourage you to get this recording. If you check right below the video here, there is a link for you to do that and permanently add this session and all of them, in fact, to your library. Okay, so our time, can you believe it, Harrison, is really gone by. I want to just give you at this time the opportunity to share a gift that you have for our viewing audience. Can you tell us more about that?
So what I've decided to do for those who wanted more information or who wanted some practical and tactical tips, things that they can begin working on to, work on forgiveness or deepening their understanding and appreciation of love. I wrote a blog that is connected to this very same interview today on my website, harrisonhelms.com. It's right under the blog section. I'll also have a link for that as well. But it basically outlines about 5 tips that everybody can begin looking for and applying to their lives, not later, but right now. Very practical tips that you will find is very you-centric. Because sometimes in the process of forgiveness and even loving, we make the ability to do that about the other person, right? But again, if we continue to wait for someone else to be something for us to grow, we may never grow. And what that blog will outline are some things for you to begin being aware of in yourself, right? Spiteful, passive-aggressive behaviors, expectations, not realizing who this person is versus who you want them to be, and being able to understand limitations and capacity. Because sometimes people just do not have the capacity at a particular point in their lives to do what we may need them to do. How do you handle that? Well, the blog will talk about all of that in very basic terms that's easy for anybody to grasp. And so I just want to present that to all of the viewers today. Hope that you guys read it. Hope that you guys take it and apply it to your lives. Because these are all things that we can benefit from once we take responsibility for them.
Yes, definitely. Awesome. All right. Well, again, thank you so much, Harrison, for sharing your valuable and proven insights with us today on this wonderful subject matter of love and forgiveness. And thank you, our viewing audience, for tuning in and staying with us till the end. Make sure, I would say to you, to check your inbox so that you don't miss any of the upcoming videos in this series. I look forward to having you join us again soon. Thank you. Bye.